and how little the Democratic Party is paying attention to them, because no different than the Republican Party, it has been focused for too long and too intently on the big money interests that fund its campaigns.
Who thought that an actress from Sex and the City would be a progressive hero? But that's currently what's happening. So Cynthia Nixon, who is an actress from Sex and the City, is running up against New York Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democratic primary. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of videos that she's released. First, her campaign ad, and then I'm going to show you a very impressive clip from her speech at the Human Rights Campaign. But first, let's look at this campaign ad.
My algebra test. What was it? Algebra. Yeah.
New York is my home.
How you doing?
I've never lived anywhere else. When I grew up here, it was just my mom and me in a one-bedroom, fifth-floor walk-up. New York is where I was raised and where I'm raising my kids. I'm a proud public school graduate and a prouder public school parent. I was given chances I just don't see for most of New York's kids today. Our leaders are letting us down. We are now the most unequal state in the entire country, with both incredible wealth and extreme poverty. Half the kids in our upstate cities live below the poverty line. How did we let this happen? I love New York. I've never wanted to live anywhere else, but something has to change. We want our government to work again on health care, ending mass incarceration, fixing our broken subway. We are sick of politicians who care more about headlines and power than they do about us.
It can't just be business as usual anymore. If we're going to get at the root problem of inequity, we have to turn the system upside down. We have to go out ourselves and seize it. This is a time to stick our necks out, to remember where we came from. This is a time to be visible. This is a time to fight.
I'm Cynthia Nixon. I'm a New Yorker. And together, we can win this fight.
Next stop is Albany.
Did you catch that at the end there? Next stop, Albany. Coming right for Andrew Cuomo. Now, I thought that was a great ad. It was well shot, well edited. It was a good introduction to who Cynthia Nixon is, how she's grown up in New York, how she's gone to public schools, support the public school system. And in fact, of course, more funding into public schools is a big issue for her campaign. Another big issue for her campaign is inequality, which is an obvious issue for anybody that is aware of wealth inequality in America. She also touches on healthcare, though doesn't get too specific into it. Ending mass incarceration, again, not too specific, but this is an introductory campaign ad. So it's really just, easing you into who Cynthia Nixon is and what she's about. Also mentions fixing the broken subway system, which, as somebody who is from Toronto, I find hilarious. Because when I went to New York City, I was impressed by how incredible the New York subway is compared to Toronto's. Now, clearly, as somebody who is not a New Yorker, I'm not aware of the issues that New York faces with the subway system. So Cynthia Nixon, I imagine, knows more than I do. But I'm just saying, from somebody who comes outside New York, I thought the subway was pretty good. But clearly, there is some fixing to be done. Now, I want to get to something that was kind of teased in her campaign ad, and that was her speech at the Human Rights Campaign. So she had an incredible speech there, and I'm going to show you a clip from that where she really touches on some issues that are true progressive issues.
We have to be more than the anti-Trump party. We have to actually offer a different vision of how things could be. Our leaders can't just say, vote for me because I'm not Donald Trump. We need to give voters something to vote for. Because the fact of the matter is, Donald Trump didn't just come out of nowhere. He isn't the totality of the problem, he is just the capstone. He was able to expose and then exploit in a sickening way how desperate working people are and how little the Democratic Party is paying attention to them, because no different than the Republican Party, it has been focused for too long and too intently on the big money interests that fund its campaigns. The wealth disparity in our country is greater than at any time since the 1920s. Today, the top 1% of households own more wealth than the bottom 90% combined. And as scary as that figure is, the scariest part is the speed with which it continues to widen. Ignoring this economic crisis is what got us Donald Trump in the first place. It can't just be business as usual anymore. So in 2018, we don't just need to elect more Democrats. We also need better Democrats.
So I thought that speech was amazing. And it really was a precursor to her run for governor, as this speech was, I think, from last month. So she was just prepping for what she is now doing. And this is something that, this is the kind of speech that you would expect out of, you know, a grassroots activist or like a teacher. But here is a celebrity, an actress from Sex and the City, and she is touching on these issues that are of concern to real people. Now, she gets into just some specifics of what she talks about there. We need something to vote for. Exactly right. You can't just be the party of voting against Donald Trump. That will really only get you so far. Yes, it may hand you Congress in 2018, but you have to think past that. How do you retain these voters? Once people get Trump out, and once this Republican Party is out, how do you keep those Democratic voters? How do you keep these people coming out again and continuing to vote for you? You have to offer them something. Otherwise, we're just going to keep seeing these swings back and forth. You have to actually offer and deliver something to your voters. Now, she also touches on how this is the best way to talk about Trump. How Trump has exposed the issues that workers face, but also exploited those working people. So sure, Trump acted like he was for the little guy, talking about, you know, trade deals that have left thousands of families without jobs and, you know, lower incomes. But then he gets in and appoints a bunch of bankers to his cabinet, just a bunch of billionaires. This is the Trump that was talking out against the establishment, and then he just opens the door to the worst of the worst within the establishment. So that's how you discuss Trump. You don't focus on on the dumb shit that he says, on his dumb tweets, even on his sexism. These are things that you can bring up to build a case. But the focus of your case against Trump should be how he has swindled people into voting for him. So she also touches on these are the last 3 points I have here are the best points. Quote, the Democratic Party is too focused on big money interests. That's all I've been saying for the past 2 years. That's all really YouTube, people on YouTube, progressives on YouTube. That's all we've been talking about. How the Democratic Party, just like the Republican Party, focuses too much on their big money interests. And that's how you lose voters. Voters aren't stupid. They can see that you are taking, you know, large amounts of money from certain industries like the healthcare industry, and then turning around and saying, oh, we can't do Medicare for all, when in fact, they're not doing Medicare for all because it would hurt their big donors in pharma and insurance. So you have to be able to see that connection. And when you expose it as a politician, as somebody running for office, then you begin to look a a lot better in terms of a candidate, because there is now a glimmer of hope that somebody like Cynthia Nixon might actually change things. Now, the last 2 points here, wealth disparity, she mentions again, which is an obvious and strong point. And we can't just elect Democrats. We need better Democrats. Exactly. You need Democrats who aren't tied to big money interests. You need Democrats who are actually willing to fight for their voters and not just, talk a big game and then get in and then turn around and just listen to their big money interests, or, go to cocktail parties and listen to the wealthiest of the wealthy and address their needs, but then just completely ignore your voters until election time comes around and all of a sudden, oh, look at all these great things I've done. Look what I promised to do. No. You have to be somebody who actually cares about people and is aware of the issues and the corruption that exists within politics. Now, let's get to something that, so on Cynthia Nixon's website, she has a long list of issues that she cares about. I want to touch on a couple here that she mentions because she directly addresses Andrew Cuomo. It was a choice to slash taxes for the super rich and impose austerity on everybody else. It was a choice to allow the schools attended by children of color to be underfunded and over-policed. It was a choice to sell our government off to corporate interests and wealthy donors, while the rest of us suffer. These are choices usually made by Republicans, but for the past 8 years, they are all choices that have been made by our governor, Andrew Cuomo. Andrew Cuomo has given massive tax breaks to corporations and the super rich, while starving the state and its cities of the most basic services and decimating our infrastructure. His inhumane budgets have been passed on the backs of our children, our working and middle class, and our elderly. So Cynthia Nixon touches on some issues here that really expose Andrew Cuomo as being not much better than a Republican. So he listens to corporate interests, cuts taxes for the rich, underfunds schools, and decimated the infrastructure. Now, there's more here from Splinter News just about exactly how Andrew Cuomo has manipulated the system to push down progressives. Cuomo has worked to prop up the Independent Democratic Conference, a group of 8 breakaway state Senate Democrats who caucus with Republicans, effectively giving them the majority. The Republican-led state Senate, with the help of the IDC, has worked to block progressive priorities on reproductive rights, immigration, and electoral reform. So, Andrew Cuomo has essentially been working with Republicans to block progressive policy. And this guy is the governor of New York, which should be a very progressive state next to California. Now, changing gears here a little bit, here's why we should be excited about Nixon's chances in this race. So, this from Splinter. 4 years ago, Cuomo was challenged on the left by Zephyr Teachout. Teachout, who was a relatively unknown university professor at the time, ran with little organizational backing and money, but still won 35% of the primary vote. Now she is serving as Nixon's campaign treasurer. All right, so Zephyr Teachout, who is a bold Bernie-supporting progressive and had very little money, very little organizational backing, was able to get 35% of the vote in a primary against Andrew Cuomo. This is somebody who most people can't even pronounce her name properly. Okay, so considering that, and considering she had no name recognition, very little money, 35% in a primary is pretty damn impressive. Now, it's actually even more impressive when you look at the map. So, looking at the map, Andrew Cuomo is the blue, and Zephyr Teachout is the yellow. So, Andrew Cuomo won that race because he was able to win high population areas like New York City. But now knowing that Cynthia Nixon, who has strong name recognition, knowing that she has now the ability to be able to gain more voters in high population areas because of her name recognition and her bold platform, it makes you realize that there actually is a really good shot at Cynthia Nixon winning this race against Andrew Cuomo. And that's something that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, or don't acknowledge for whatever reason. That name recognition is incredibly important. Now, if people don't know your name, it's very unlikely that they are going to vote for you. And that's why money is so important. That's why politicians like Andrew Cuomo do raise so much money from corporations, because they're able to get their name out there. Now, Cuomo has other benefits of, he comes from a long line of people who are in the spotlight. So he would have had that name recognition anyways. But that's why these politicians raise that money. They then use that money to flood radio and television with their ads so that people are now aware of their name. Now, when you have Cynthia Nixon, who already has some built-in name recognition, she now has the ability to attain more voters in places like New York City, because people already associate Cynthia Nixon with New York City. So this gives her an opportunity that anybody else going up against Andrew Cuomo wouldn't necessarily have. And now you tie that name recognition with her bold progressive policy that is supported not just within progressives within New York City, but people that are in upstate New York. You now see how Cynthia Nixon has the ability to win this race. But it's 6 months away. Go to Cynthia Nixon's website. I'll put a link to it below. If you're in New York, do something. Volunteer, donate, get involved. Get Cynthia Nixon elected and defeat Andrew Cuomo. Hey, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider throwing me a few bucks on Patreon at patreon.com/therationalnational or therationalnational.com/join.